On this episode of a Soul's Quest podcast, Omar and I are discussing the importance of understanding empathy and how it relates to our quest. Stay tuned. Yeah.
So in today's episode, we want to talk about empathy, right? And understanding the difference between empathy and sympathy, which is two different things. So how do we arrive at building that a little bit more? But I want to start this episode by reading a quote.
Okay.
I think that it's really kind of like foundational for what we're talking about, right? So it goes like this. I think we all have empathy. We may not have the courage to display it. Maya Angelou. Okay, so with that quote in mind and with that thought in mind, what is empathy as opposed to sympathy?
So I think people, so Maya Angelou said that. I think we all have empathy, but we don't have the courage to display it, right? Mm-hmm. So for people who understand what empathy is, and the differences between empathy and sympathy, I think it's easier to show it, but it still takes a lot of vulnerability to show empathy.
Okay.
So I love Brené Brown. I think I've talked about her on this season and whatnot. And she's really famous for, she's done research on shame.
Okay.
And
shame.
on shame. And she's done tons of stuff, but she talks about empathy and sympathy, and she gives like a really good definition of the differences between empathy and sympathy. And that is that empathy fuels connection. Okay. And sympathy drives disconnection.
Okay.
Okay. So
what does she mean by that?
What she means is that it's pretty simple. Empathy is being able to feel with another person.
Okay.
Feel with them, not feel for them. Okay. So she gives this really good a story. It's like a really good analogy because I'm a visual person, and you can like search it on YouTube. And she has this like character, cartoons and whatever, and she shows this one character in this pit, right? And another character at the top of the pit. And sympathy is the person at the top of the pit, or the character at the top of the pit, saying, "Hey, yo, you all right down there? You need a sandwich? What? Okay, I see that. Good. Okay, whatever. Right? You just like, at least you got food. At least you know, whatever. Okay. And a lot of times when we're talking to people, we tend to have that. Well, at least you have your dad, or you have your brother to help you with that, or at least you have a car, or at least. Empathy doesn't start with at least.
So how does empathy start?
Empathy starts with being the character at the top of that dark pit with this other person. So you're the person in the dark pit. You're going through a really dark experience. You're having a really difficult time. And for me to approach you and say, like in this video, she shows the character getting a ladder, putting it on this thing, and climbing down into that pit of darkness with that person, and saying, "Hey, I'm here with you. I feel you, and I'm gonna be here with you through it." You know what I mean? Yeah. And so the difference between that is the person at the top going, "Yo, I'll send you down a sandwich. You know, you can be all right. Yeah. You got this. You got this. Don't, whatever. At least," or "I'm here with you. I feel you. And I understand what you're going through. I'm here with you."
This reminds me of two things, right? I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to really understand this as well. The first thing that it reminds me of, and I talked about it in a previous episode, the idea of sympathy is what you see happening, like for instance, in places like Haiti and third world countries that are affected by a thing, in which you have these NGOs, collecting money, but the money doesn't really go into those people, or they go in there and they destroy the native industries by flooding it with stuff, just because they feel like they feel sympathetic to the plight of those individuals.
Yeah, I feel sorry for them.
You feel sorry for them. You know, it's like the same thing with, you know, the toy drives for poor people, or the turkey giving. It's like you feel sympathy, which is in and of itself is not a negative.
I think those are really great things to do. I don't want to take away from those things, and I know that you have those places that don't put the money where it needs to go, and so on and so forth. I think people need clothing, they need help, they need a handout, you know. But sympathy is okay, here you go, next, you know. But what empathy is, people don't need people to feel sorry for them. They need connection.
Yeah.
And empathy is about connection.
The other part about empathy that it reminds me of that movie What Dreams May Come, right? When Robin Williams goes into the pits of hell to save his wife. But something that happens in there, and this is one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because like in that movie, he went down to that pit, like you mentioned. But there was a moment in which he began to feel stuck in there. So how does one become empathetic without being stuck in that hell or in that pit that person is in?
And that's a great question. So whenever you're being, and I'm not going to say that I have the right answer, but when I think about that, first of all, when you're showing empathy with somebody, again, it's not starting with at least, because you're not feeling sorry for, you're not showing empathy.
Minimizing.
Yeah, you're minimizing
what
their
they're
pain.
going through. Yeah.
But what you need to do as the person that's being empathic is you need to become vulnerable to say, I understand what you're going through. For example, somebody gets their car repoed, right? They can't pay for their car anymore. They're going through it financially. I can honestly say, full transparency, I know what that feels like. So I would sit there with that person and be like, I completely understand where you are. I want to hear how you're feeling about it. I'm here for you. I've been here, and you're not alone. You are not alone. And that connection right there, you're experiencing those feelings in your own body, and thus able to be empathic with that individual because there's a connection now there.
Yeah.
Right? Anybody who's experienced divorce, I can relate to that person. If they had a significant other in their past that was not so kind and stepped out and did things, I can say, I've been there before, and those are things that you can relate with people on to drive that connection and fuel that, right? And so what happens though is that sometimes we allow ourselves to get so drawn into helping somebody that we're now, it's a slippery slope, right? Because you want to help the person and you want to be empathic, but you don't want to get so caught up that you're like, oh man, this is bad. You lose your identity. So you have to be cognizant of that and be conscious of, I'm here to listen. But you also have to be that person to say, I'm here to listen, but these are some options. Let's do this together. You know what I mean? I always think about Joan Rivera. We are interviewing her, or we may have already interviewed her at this point.
We will.
Okay.
We'll record ahead, but yes, she's coming later.
She's coming later.
Yeah.
But she reminds me of that type of a person.
Okay.
And so shout out to Joan. She is amazing because the thing with Joan is that she listens to you. She's like, she may not necessarily have experienced that, but she feels you to the point where you feel like she's feeling you. And then she doesn't leave you, but she gives you options. How can I help you? Let's go. Let's call this place together. Let's do this. And she sacrifices her time to do that. But once that person, you got to know when that person is just like, they don't want to get out of this pit. And then the person that does. And you have to be able to separate yourself from the person that just doesn't want to get out of the pit, right? You have to, for your own sanity.
So just to kind of like recap, right? Because this reminds me, this is a lot of Carl Rogers.
Yeah, humanistic.
Humanistic person-centered approach of therapy and understanding, getting to know the individual. But it also reminds me, like in popular art, of like the old sage, like a Yoda or an Obi-Wan or a Gandalf, in which they guide the person. They don't solve the problem, but they guide the person through the problem. Is that more of the empathy aspect of it?
Yeah, I think when you're there with somebody, and you can have that connection, and you can let them express themselves and share and say what's happening with them, and you feel that and you understand it, and you're like, I'm here for you, and then help them. Because sometimes people are in such a dark place, they can't figure out what to do next. Yeah. But you've already been through it because you're searching yourself for these feelings that you've already experienced.
So, but this also reminds me of, from a practical standpoint, the 1 Minute Manager, in which you don't really solve the problem.
They have to solve their own problem.
You're able to, you ask questions. What do you think? What do you think you should do? Things like that, in order to help them arrive at the solution, right?
Right. Yeah, because when you fix the problem for them, that may not be the way to fix you can't fix other people's problems.
Yeah.
You can make suggestions and you can say, how can I help you to do that? Would that help? But I think that when you do that, you can't, when you allow the person to solve their own problems, they become stronger for it. Yeah, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, they don't become codependent on you.
Right.
This leads me into the next question, which I think is very pertinent, because you mentioned before that if you've gone through something yourself, right, it becomes easier to become empathic to somebody else, right? If you experience pain and you experience these things, but how do you show empathy, right, when you really haven't experienced any pain, any loss, any suffering? How do you do that?
Has there been a person that hasn't experienced pain in some way, shape, or form, or loss in some way, shape, or form?
Well, no, there hasn't been. But there are people who are very self-centered that have been blessed with a lot of things in which they don't feel empathy towards others. So how does a person like that can relate to someone that is not able to really see the human aspect of someone, or someone that is not unaware, let's say unaware of their capability? How does a person like that show empathy?
I think the first question, or the first thing that has to be stated, and I think that we've said this throughout season 1 and season 2 so far, is that people have to want or have the desire to change and be better. Okay. And so if you recognize when you're going through something that people are more sympathetic, like, well, at least you have a car, at least your parents got money, at least your parents, that doesn't feel good. Because you're actually experiencing something that you're like, I know, but damn, that's not what I want to hear. I want somebody to like connect with me. If you can actually arrive at that place where you see the differences, then you can start taking on the whole process of learning how to be more empathic, which takes, you have to be able to remove judgment. There are people who are in the pits of darkness more often or more frequently than other people. So you have to be able to say, this person's just got some bad luck, but I understand what they're going through. I've lost my car. I've been through a divorce. I had to share.
That's what I'm saying. There's people that haven't gone through those things. I mean, everybody does experience some level of pain and loss.
Right.
But there are people that haven't.
Right. But
so how do they show empathy? Oh, how do they grow empathy?
They have to want to understand the differences between empathy and sympathy. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't honestly believe that there is a person out there that hasn't experienced some sort of pain or loss. I just don't. I want to meet the person who has never experienced loss or pain. I would love to meet that person. Everybody's experienced. They've lost a pet. They've lost a grandmother. They've lost in that way. They've lost a job. They've lost their purse. Their purse was broke. Their house was broken into. That something has happened to everybody that has been painful. And so in that experience, what was that like? Oh, damn. Oh, well, at least you're alive. But that's not connecting with the person, because they broke into your car and now you feel like a victim, and the house was vandalized and they looked through your drawers, and that at least they didn't hurt you. That's sympathy as opposed to empathy. So I think that if you want to understand the differences between empathy and sympathy, you have to be able to look within. And that's a hard thing to do. It's one of the things that we talk about, and recognize the differences, because I'm guilty of that. I've done that. Well, at least you're healthy.
Yeah.
That's not what somebody wants to hear. You know what I mean?
So let me get this straight, because I'm trying to understand it. So you're saying that we all feel pain, we all experience pain. Let's talk about the experiences of pain. It could be a loss of a dear one, loss of a family member, some obstacle in life, something along those lines. We all experience that.
Going through anxieties, test taking anxieties. I'm going through a dissertation right now. I rely on people who are going through this process or who have gone through it to help me. And don't say, well, at least you got a couple of words on paper. I want people to connect with me.
So what I'm saying is that the experience, regardless of whatever experience it is, but that feeling of loss, that feeling of pain, it doesn't have to be the same type of pain, but as long as you understand what pain feels like, what discomfort feels like, regardless of whatever it is, that's the point in which you could if you understand that stimuli, then you could empathize with someone, regardless of the circumstances being different.
And it takes being vulnerable to do that.
It takes being vulnerable to do that.
And not everybody wants to be vulnerable. Just like Maya Angelou said, not everybody has the courage to show it.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, we all feel the pain. And I was, I'm playing the devil's advocate.
That's good.
Because and I got a question right now, because I know there's some smart ass and narcissists out there that thinks, that happens to me, so I kind of wanted to allude to that, because that's the idea. It's like our common, the feelings and the experiences that we all feel, that we all go through, gives us that starting point to feel empathy for another human being, regardless, because that's the experience of being human.
That's the connection.
That will be the connection. And that will be the human connection.
Right there. Yeah.
Excellent. So then, but to answer my other question, because it kind of leads me into that, because again, I'm a playing the devil's advocate, try to be a smartass, because I could see someone taking the Darwinian stance that life is about the survival of the fittest and that I have to get mine. How do you reconcile empathy from that side? Or better yet, there are people like this in the world. We can't deny it. This is a reality of people that we confront with. So how does a person like that develop empathy? And also, how do we as individuals have empathy to those people? It's a loaded question.
Good question, yeah. So what you're saying, so I understand the question correctly, is that there are going to be people who are going to say, I'm not feeling sorry for anybody. I'm just going to be like, whatever, I got to get mine. Okay. Those are the very people that I'm talking about that have not taken a moment to pause and understand that we are all similar, which is what we talk about with ASQ. Yep. We talk about how much in common we have with one another, right? And if we would take a moment to really understand how connected we are, we would be a little bit more empathic towards each other, because we wouldn't be so quick to react and judge another person. Again, empathy is about removing judgment. Brené Brown has a framework for all of this, right? That she talks about. And I love her framework. So, cause it's really easy, but
do you want to share that framework?
Yeah, I have it. I have it written down because that's one I wanted to. It's basically that you have to be able to, and this sort of answers your question, because you have to be able to. You can't. I got to get mine. It's not about you. This is not about you.
But that person believes that it is about them.
But it's not. I'm here to tell that person, whoever that person is, this is not about you. This is not your world, and we live in it. We live in a world together, and we're connected together. Okay. So they can say that all day long. And I would love to get comments about that, or feedback on that, because I defy somebody to tell me that this is your world and we just live in it. I mean, come on, that isn't even a reasonable response. We are human beings. We are connected, and we all feel things similarly. We experience things similarly. I'm not saying the same. And we all have things that happen to us that connect us, right? So Brené Brown, her framework is really simple. She has 4 steps that she's put out there. And basically it's about being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So it's perspective taking, right? So when you can literally say, I have been there, I have had my car. I've been in a place where I haven't been able to afford my car, and I was so close to having my car repoed. This person had their car repoed, but you feel that anxiety, that pain, that angst of, oh my God, I have to have a car. I won't get to work. Then I really can't pay for. You have to put yourself in that person's shoes. Mm-hmm. You can't be saying, well, if they weren't doing this and they weren't doing that. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people out there who are, spending money on ridiculous things when they shouldn't be paying for their car note. I get that. It's situational. I'm not saying that this applies to every single situation. You know what I mean? It's very situational. Then you have to be able to take the judgment, because that's what I'm talking about. When you start to say, well, if they weren't doing this, take the judgment out of the equation. You know what I mean? Sometimes people are so taken aback or so tired of being judged, or being people feeling sorry for them. Well, at least this. Well, if you could have done that, if you did this, at least this. That they're like, I'm not connecting, and they don't learn. Sometimes you can teach people a lesson just by listening to them and relating to that person and connecting with them. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think that would really make a big difference with a lot of people who are just spending money recklessly. And I'm not saying that that's the person you got to have all this empathy for. If they know what they're doing and they don't care, that's one of the situations that I'm talking about from earlier with the question you asked. You have to understand what you're dealing with too. Yeah. Then you have to be able to recognize the emotion in the other person. And the way that you do that is by going deep inside and searching for that feeling in yourself.
Okay.
So that's how you recognize that emotion in somebody else. So when you talked about, a couple episodes, we talked about your quest and where you are with it. And you had talked about, I left my job and this and that. And obviously I know more about it. I feel your pain because I'm going through a lot of those things. I felt that I've been talked to by people, like not as badly as you were, but I've been in a situation similar to that. And I searched deep inside to say, whoa, I need to step back and not be judgmental and not be so hard on my husband, who is, I expect to be stronger, or da. And I try to be more empathic and say, I get that, I feel you, I get it. And that's why when you talk about it, it's easy for me to sit and listen to you, because I know that you're making strides to make changes in how you are and how you feel. And then the last thing is that you need to be able to communicate that you recognize and understand, and that you feel that emotion. And we've already talked about that. So those are basically the steps that she has. And I'm cheating because I have my little note cards here, because I wouldn't have remembered that. But basically, those are the ways that you develop empathy and that you consistently develop it.
No, it's interesting that you mention all this. And again, I'm playing the devil's advocate, because I know there's a lot of pessimism and there's a lot of separation and there's a lot of classism and people who believe that they're better than another human being. I mean, this is a reality of our world and we can't escape that. But if you really look at all the religions, they have pretty much have the same thing: love your neighbor as you would thyself. And that idea, it's the foundation of empathy from my standpoint, because if you're going and if you're experiencing any kind of discomfort in your life, and you know how that feels and how it emotionally binds you, then you are able to relate to the other person, because it may not be the same. You may not be at the same financial status or social economic class, but that empathy of like, wow, I wouldn't want to be in that situation. So I don't understand, how hard, that must be hard to go through that.
I've never been through that.
But I could, I could understand the pain of not having what I'm having or what I have. And I think this is something that we're really lacking in our world. I think that there's a very separation from that spiritual, from that point of view, spiritual, emotional, psychological standpoint, in which we don't see ourselves in the others,
And that's just it, is that we that's how we separate ourselves in the human race. That's how you're right. Barack Obama, I think I shared that quote with you too. He had said a quote, I don't know it verbatim, but basically he had said that the one thing that we are missing.
I think that I got the quote right here. It says, the biggest deficit that we have in our society and in the world right now, it's an empathetic deficit. We are in great need of people being able to stand in someone else's shoes and see the world through their eyes.
Yeah. So when we see the person that's begging on the road, 9 times out of 10, what we're saying is, I ain't giving that dude any money, because you know what he's going to do is go out and buy beer. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fine. It's okay to think that. So then how do you know that every single person that's begging for money on the corner is going to take that money and go buy beer?
It's true. I remember when I was young, I remember this story when I was a Boy Scout. We were going on a trip and we were in Midtown, Manhattan, and there was a homeless guy on the strip, and it was, Ken was in the front, leading the group, and then we were towards the back, and one kid kind of like rudely stepped over the homeless person rudely. Ken stopped everybody and just went to the kid, and he yelled at the kid, and he said, I have seen people, he used to be an executive with AT&T. He's like, I have seen people in positions in which they have money, they ended up like this because of no fault of their own.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So how dare you treat someone like that? Mm-hmm. And again, going back to the principles of Christianity in itself, it's taking care of those who are of lesser mean, mm-hmm. but not from a sympathetic, mm-hmm. but from an empathetic point of view.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That those are foundational things, especially that I've seen and that I've seen in things like what Christ lived. That we're lacking. But so then reading that quote and looking at those things, why are we so detached from those core principles that really were supposed to be the foundation of our world, of every religion? I
think that people, there's again on social media, you see all these different quotes and stuff, and there's a quote, and I don't know what it said exactly, but it was talking about how people go to church on Sundays and whatnot, or they preach that they're, Christians and whatever, but they don't live the life of a Christian. Mm-hmm. So I think what's happening is that for show, I go to church.
But this is across all religions, and we only talk about Christianity because it's our experience.
It's our experience, yeah. And so, I'm speaking from my own experience. Yeah. I've had, I belonged to a church. I was a part of that church, and when I went through the deepest, darkest part of my life at that time, they all turned their back on me.
Yeah.
Every single person turned their back on me. And I had nobody. I was the most alone I had ever been. And that was difficult for me because I didn't have anybody that was being empathic. And nobody was like, I understand what you're going through. It was nothing but judgment. It was not taking it from my perspective. They took my ex's words and they believed that, and because he was going to church and he was living that, superficial, whatever. And not one person reached out to me. And that taught me a lesson. And the lesson that I learned from that is I never want to be that type of person. Okay. And so I stopped going to church because I started believing that I don't have to go to the house of God because I believe that lives within me. I have that extension of God in me. And I'm not trying to get religious, but I feel like I have that in me and I exude that by being kind, being empathic, by extending grace, by not being judgmental. All things, by the way, full disclosure, that I'm working on because I'm not perfect.
Correct.
And I admit that. I humbly admit that.
Yeah.
But I recognize those things more in me, especially as I get older, and I understand. I'm not saying you got to give every dollar to the person on the corner. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah. You know what I mean? But you don't have to pass judgment either.
Correct.
You know what? You don't have to say anything. Don't say anything. If you don't got another biblical, if you don't have anything, or a mom thing maybe. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all.
Don't say it at all, yeah.
Don't be judgmental. You don't have to do anything for that person. Mm-hmm. Maybe they are just buying beers. What's it to you? Why is that your business?
But again, it's like
and a lot of people are going to say it's affecting our society. It's affecting, mm-hmm. This comes out of my pocket. We're taxpayers. I get all that. I really do. I'm not saying, I'm just saying that a little bit of fucking kindness goes a long way.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing about societal conditions and that we can't have this, this ruckus on the corner and stuff.
But here's one of the things that we talked about before. It's about the idea of intent, mm-hmm. right? The idea of intent and the idea of detachment from outcome. Being empathic you're not doing it for a certain reward. You're doing it because it is the sake of doing it. You know.
So if you don't want to do it, then don't.
It has to be something that it comes from within.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it takes time to be empathic too.
Yeah, it does. It's work. It's not in our commonality to feel another pain. This is why the teachings of Jesus were so revolutionary, because, in my opinion, you know, it was so against the norm to go against the selfish nature of us,
right,
to think of others. You know, that was always the beauty of his teachings.
Yeah.
And which I don't know what's happened to that, but that's a different story. So moving on.
Another episode.
That's another episode, but moving on. So here's one of the things that I want to ask you about. And you have a degree in human services. You work in human services. I know that a lot of people that work in human services and anything that has to do with other people, they go into a situation that is called compassion fatigue, right? In which like I think the average career span of a social worker is like 3 to 5 years max, because it takes a lot of effort to be empathetic, and you could get bound. It's like I mentioned before, it's like going, like in the movie What Dreams May Come, you go into the pits of hell, and because you want to save this person, you get stuck. Yeah. And the problems become your problems, and then you stop living from your point of view. Right. So my question is, how do we avoid getting stuck in the empathic mode?
So really, I think that you really have to have it's a self-awareness. You have to have the awareness that, you know, so for social workers or therapists and whatnot, a lot of the things that we talked about when I did get my degree in human services was that you have to take time to self-care. You have to be able to step away from the giving and extending of yourself so much that you like sell yourself or sell your soul to this thing, right? And you have to have that barrier. Obviously, like a Brian would be a great person to ask this question to, because that's I'm sure it's much deeper on a fundamental basis. But I think that if you're self-aware of how you're feeling, which is the whole idea of empathy, is being able to connect with things that you've experienced. If you have that self-awareness that I'm in deep on this, I'm feeling too much, I'm getting angry about these things for this person, I'm fighting for this person, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, if you're aware of that, then you can sort of break that cycle of I don't know if it's a cycle, but you can stop yourself from going so deep that you've just, everything is gone as a result of this situation. You know what I mean? That you sell everything that you have inside of you for this person or for this situation. You can't do that.
Yeah, and I think that from what I've seen, is it's sometimes you wanted more than the other person wants it. Yeah. You know, and I think that goes back to the idea of the outcome that you're looking for.
Well, and what we talked about when we started the episode, like you can give people options, but if you see that they're not even doing anything to make their situation better, then at some point you have to cut the cord and you have to say, all right, well, I'm here to listen to you, but I'm just, you know, and you have to be able to be strong enough to tell that person, if you really care about them. Again, this is all situational, that listen, I love you, I care about you, you're a great person, but you know, you have to make some changes in order to get get over this hump or get over this situation that you're into, right? Yeah. I mean, we do that with each other. You know what I mean? It's not being rude. It's just saying, I care about you, I love you, but you got to stop focusing on the past and stop, thinking that people are going to do this for you. And like, we've done that with each other.
You know, one of the interesting things, I'm glad that you mentioned that, is because we live in a world right now in which I personally believe people don't want to feel any type of pain, right? Mm-hmm. But would you agree that sometimes a blunt delivery is also very empathic?
I think it's the words that you use for that blunt delivery.
Okay, what do you mean?
You can be blunt with somebody, but it can that person can walk away thinking, wow, I really needed that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I did. I need that. I needed to be shaken out of my apathy. You know what I mean? We've done that with each other. There's been times when I've said things and I've been blunt because, I'm a very forthcoming. Anybody that knows me,
You're blunt.
Okay, hold on. Anybody that knows me, I knows that one, I don't really like confrontation, but I don't have a problem being confrontational. I'm going to defend myself because there was a time in my life when I did not do that and people walked all over me. So I am going to stand up for myself and I am going to confront people when I think that something is not okay, especially when it involves me or people that I care about and love. Right. But there's been times that I've said things to you and I've been like, I probably could have said that just a little different. Right. We had a conversation a couple days ago and you were asking me some stuff and I was like, listen, you got to stop, doing this and you got to focus on this and this. And I said to you, I hope I wasn't hard on you. And you were like, no, it was
what
great
you needed.
because it was what you needed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the way that you say it. And I said it with love because obviously we care for each other. We love each other. So but sometimes I can be hard on you because I do love you and we've been together for a really freaking long time. So I can be like,
I thought it was majestic and beautiful.
It is majestic and beautiful. It is.
Not the words.
21 years is amazing. And I'm happy for it. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. But,
me
and
too.
I think highly of you. And I think what happens is we have that. So that goes into expectations. Mm-hmm. And that can be a slippery slope too, because you're like, well, I'm expecting you to be better.
Yes.
But you can't do that to other people because when you put and I say this all the time, when you put an expectation on somebody else, they're always going to let you down.
And it's at the person's time frame.
Of course.
Like
not everybody's the same.
I saw that a lot in youth development because there are certain people that felt that kids should be at a certain point, but it's at their time. It's everybody has a different path. I mean, you see it in the schools. You you should be at this level by now.
And people arrive at those levels at different times.
And we're not okay with those type of things and those realizations because that is part of a person's quest.
Right. Yeah. And that is their quest, not yours.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to be able to say what you need to say, and then step back. Right. Or I let go and can just continue to live. It doesn't mean that you have to be there present.
Right.
All the
time. Some people need that oomph, a little push,
yeah.
A little bit of like, come on, man, you're better than this. You got to get your head out of your ass. This is going to be okay. But when you say it in a way that they know that you mean it,
that it
you know what I mean?
That
it comes from this. Yes.
Place.
It's intention. You're right.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. So yeah.
Now, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because again, I'm always putting myself in other people's minds. And there's some smart ass out there is like, well, this whole empathic stuff is for weak people, and it's like whatever, it's like that's a sign of weakness. There's a school of thought that is like that it's
that
what would you say to that?
That okay, I would say that's an emotionally unintelligent individual.
Damn.
Just saying.
What would you say like
the
that?
reason
why
that
would
I
you
say
say
that
like that? That
because when we talked about emotional intelligence, we talk about the fact that relationships like IQ and emotional intelligence, they're different. We talked about that. IQ gets you in the door, right? But emotional intelligence keeps you in the game, or IQ gets you in the game, but emotional intelligence keeps you in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you understand that those components of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, empathy is a part of emotional intelligence, then you understand that it's important to focus on nurturing that or fostering that those abilities within. And anybody who knows that understands that they're going to be more successful because they're going to have those relationships that are important.
And I bring that up because there's a very Darwinian mentality. I mean, it's reality, and people don't see it. Then we're not really we're not really seeing the world for what it is. But there's a very Darwinian mentality of conquering and strong. and they believe that those things are weakness, and those people are very high achieving in a lot of different ways, but it's also it could become very destructive if it's not balanced in the way of understanding that a person is part of the whole. Like,
I would say that
would that summarize it?
Yeah, I would say at some point those high achieving people who have been very successful, because I would say there are a lot of people who are not emotionally intelligent who've been very successful, but in some way, shape, or form, they're suffering in their life.
Yeah.
Whether it be by relationships that they don't have, that they could have had, whether it be by just being ugly. I mean,
or even more on a level that is not their own, is that they're also affecting, and they don't recognize it.
Yeah,
they're affecting the totality of
affecting other people. Yeah, and they don't even know it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's really important. I think, like I said, I think it's really, really simple. And it's about being, it's simple, but I think it's hard for people to in those moments when you're in the supermarket or you're shopping or you're doing stuff, and you're just so self-centered in those moments. You're focused on, I'm in and out, I'm just doing this, that you don't take the moment to somebody drop their money, help them pick up or they drop the grocery, I don't know, whatever. Yeah. And be kind and instead of being like, ugh, you know, how many times have I gotten in a line? I'm like, I look at you and I'm like, we got in the wrong line. And I'm like, just be patient. We're going to get out of here. It's, you know, and I have to check myself. I'm not perfect. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm just saying that I recognize that I need to work on these things.
I just want you to be empathetic to me. So when we go in grocery and I'm singing, that you just don't judge me.
No, I just walk away.
So to complete this episode, I do have one final question, right? Because everything has to do with the quest and how a person utilizes it. So why is it important for our soul questers to develop empathy as they progress in their quest?
I think that the most important aspect is that relationships that are healthy relationships are built on the ability to be able to relate to that person and understand that you and I, for example, we have a pretty healthy and robust relationship, right? I think it's we have fun, we laugh, you know, we have common things that we like to do together. We do things separate. You know, I go out with my friends here and there. You
I got no
you
friends.
Stay home. You stay home, or you come with me, you know, and I, you know, you like to do TikTok. I'm like not as big on TikTok. You know what I mean? Like I'm getting better at TikTok though.
I put stuff on TikTok. I don't do anything.
I just put kitty videos up. So, I think when you have healthy and robust relationships require the ability to understand that we have different perspectives and that we're unique individuals and that we have to be able to understand that. And when you remove judgment and you remove the things that bind you into wanting to control that person, you become a better person all around, and you have an easier quest as a result because you start to release these things that bind you. And I think those are, I would really like to say that that's like, it's a form of control that you're releasing when you are able to say, okay, so you like raw fish. I don't. So we can still go to this place and I'll eat this and you eat that. And we're good. And that's okay. There are things that you eat that I'm like, yeah, no, I'm good. And there, you know, like I don't want to touch raw chicken. That's disgusting, you know? So you do it. And we got a little thing here. No judgment. You don't mind touching it. That's great. It's a bad example, but it's just like relationships. You have to understand with relationships with anybody that people are different.
And our world is relationship based. I mean, like we interact with one another. We interact with different types of people,
and to appreciate those differences and appreciate the different cultures and appreciate the foods and what they do and how they experience things and how they see things. You know, some people think that dogs are not meant to be whatever. Here in the Western world, they're everything. But understand their perspectives. They're not bad people because they don't think dogs are like the greatest thing in the planet. They're just different. And that's building that empathic side of us. And that makes your quest easier, I think, because you release that control of wanting to get people to see your perspective only. Yeah. Your perspective doesn't only exist.
That's a pretty good way to end it right there. I mean, I like the fact that we need to get out of our way.
Yes.
And to think that we are the end all be all of everything.
Yep.
And that we need to be able to see that there are all the different points of views. And that it is okay to have different points of views, and that we don't have to violate the rights of other people.
Right.
And by doing these things, then we shine some light or bring more light,
right,
or brightness into existence, into the world,
and into our own lives,
and
individual
into our own
lives
individually.
As you just release those chains. I think of them as binds and chains.
Yeah, I never looked at it like that, but I could see why holding on to
your perspective is
it is bound, and it's a temporary identity, that is very limited.
Very.
Yeah, because we're so much more, and we're so interconnected that it's a limiting belief.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a very good
and
perspective.
When you have a limited belief, then you're just limiting yourself. So you can't go on a quest wholeheartedly. If you like this episode, make sure that you subscribe. And for more information, check us out at asoulsquest.com.